Hey everyone, I'm back today with another deck profile video, and today we'll be covering my Vanquish Soul deck. So, at first glance, this deck is, from a meta perspective, it's at best, it's like a low-end rogue level strategy. However, it does have several advantages, as we'll soon see throughout the deck profile. So, without further ado, let's get started with the main deck. So to start off, we have obviously the 3 Vanquish Soul Raisin. This card is basically the main monster search of the deck, and when it's summoned, it searches for any other Vanquish Soul monster except another copy of itself. In addition, it's an 1800 beater, meaning that it's fairly strong, and it also has, like all Vanquish Soul monsters, it has a quick effect that can be used. That means it can be used on either player's turn, and depending on what attributes you reveal in your hand, you can either destroy all monsters in the same column as it. So, like, for this particular deck, column placement is actually really important. Or its other effect is a defensive ability that prevents itself from being killed by card effects. So if your opponent plays something like a Lightning Storm or Dark Hole, and let's say you don't have anything that can protect your Raisin with, you can just say, oh, you change your Raisin's effect, reveal, say, another fire attribute, and now your Raisin will survive that Lightning Storm or Dark Hole. Next up, we have 2 copies of Vanquish Soul Dr. Madlove. This card is similar to Raisin in the fact that when it's summoned, it searches a card from your deck, but this time it focuses on Vanquish Soul spell and trap cards. And like Raisin, its quick effect is that you can reveal monsters with different attributes in your hand. And then, depending on which attributes you reveal, you can either non-targeting, by the way, make one of your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack points, or bounce a monster with the lowest defense points on the field to hand. And now I just want to clarify that the effect that composes the monster to hand, it also does not target, but it applies for both sides. The good news though is that Madlove has a solid 2000 defense line, so if your opponent has anything that has maybe something like a high attack but low defense, Madlove will be able to bounce that monster to the hand. Next up, we have 2 copies of Heavy Borger. I was previously testing this with 3 copies, but I found that it was really bricky, and sometimes I open a hand with multiple Borgers and Caesar Valius, and I don't have any combo starters. That was just super annoying to deal with. That said, this card is searchable off of Raisin, and in addition to having the standard quick effect that you can use on either player's turn, it also has a second quick effect, except this time it activates in the hand. And this is where Vanquish Souls become really interesting, because cards like Heavy Borger, during either player's main phase, you can activate this effect, target one Vanquish Soul monster you control on the field, although you cannot target another, the same type as itself. So you cannot use Borger target a second Borger. But let's say you use Borger to target another, say, Madlove, for instance. You actually bounce a Madlove to your hand and summon the Borger from your hand to the field. So why is this important? So let's say you summon Vanquish or Raisin and your opponent activates, say, Effect Valor to negate the Raisin. Okay, so normally your Raisin would be negated and you don't get the search. But guess what? If you have Borger in hand, you can activate Borger's effect, target the Raisin, bounce the Raisin back to your hand, so now the Valor or Imperm loses target, and you summon the Borger instead. And now your opponent just wasted their Valor and Imperm on nothing, while you still get the search from the Raisin. In addition, Borger's effect that allows you that's on-field effect that can be played during either player's turn. You can either reveal one dark attribute monster, which means you get to draw a card. This is really good because, again, having more draw power is never a bad thing. And remember that you can use it on either player's turn. So if you use this on your opponent's turn, you draw a hand trap. Well, great. Now you have one more card in your hand that your opponent would not be able to expect coming from you, that you can drop on them in the middle of their combo. And the second effect is arguably even better given the current end of match procedures. You can reveal one earth and one fire attribute in your hand, and now burn your opponent for 1500 damage. So if you use it on the back-to-back turns, that means you only have to really deal 5000 damage to your opponent during your battle phase. Use Borger to burn them for 15 on your turn, and then burn the last 15 on your opponent's standby phase or something, and then you just won just like that. So yes, And even if you don't burn your opponent to death, if time is called, you can use Borger, burn your opponent for 1500 damage, you're up on life points, and you win. Next, 1 copy of Vanquish Soul Caesar Valius. I used to run this card at 2, but like Borger, it's not a combo starter, and I need to have like an established like a Raisin or like a something else like a Mad Love on the field in order to trigger its effect to summon itself. It's similar to Borger in that sense, because like Borger, if you have, say, another Vanquish Soul monster on the field that's not like a dragon type, you can target that monster, bounce it to your hand, and summon it, so essentially helping all your Vanquish Soul monsters dodge cards like Imperm, Effect Veiler, and whatnot. But in addition to that, its effect allows you to, on-field effect, allows you to reveal 1 Earth attribute monster, meaning making it unaffected by activated effects. So cards like Raigeki Dark Hole and like all of those Lightning Storms, it's unaffected, cannot be killed by it. And note, it says unaffected, doesn't say cannot be destroyed. So even something like a Mirror Jade or ABC Dragon Buster won't be able to banish it. Its second effect is something more standard. You can reveal 1 of each of the 3 attributes of Fire, Earth, and Dark. And then you can non-targeting destroy any card on the field. So basically, since it's non-targeting, that means you can just activate its effect, reveal your 3 attributes, ask your opponent for a response first, and once they have decided how they want to respond with, then you can decide what card you want to destroy. So really good. Last card, last 2 cards. 1 Vanquish Soul Jiaolong because it's fire. And this card is interesting because even though it's higher than level 4, it doesn't have the tag out ability from the hand like Caesar Valius or the Heavy Borger, but its effect is a pure. It's revealing attributes from hand effect is for fire only. You can reveal 1 fire and basically non-targeting switch battle position of a monster, which means that if your opponent is attempting to go for game, you can use Jiaolong, reveal like a Raisin or even an Ash Blossom, and then you can stop 1 attack. Its second effect literally allows you to search on either player's turn by revealing 2 fires. And this is, I would argue, this is actually even better than something like Heavy Borger, because now you can actually use this to search for cards like Caesar Valius or like Heavy Borger. So this gives you 2 advantages. 1, if you have other Vanquish Soul cards on the field that make you reveal attributes, you can, even if you don't have the attributes set up on your own turn, you can use Jiaolong to set up the attributes by searching it on your opponent's turn. And then you now, not only do you have the tag out ability, you now have the other card that's in your hand, for instance, something like Raisin or Mad Love. You can use these abilities as well because now their attribute requirements are fulfilled. So yeah, Jiaolong is really nice. And finally, Vanquish Soul Pantera. This one is a free special summon from the hand if you control no monsters, so it's like a Cyber Dragon for the deck. And like Raisin, it's on field effect. It has a protection effect and a popping effect that's column based. Only this thing, it pops spell traps in the same column, and this protection effect is for destruction by battle. Which means that if you're playing against a Tenpai player, one thing you could do, put this in defense mode, activate its effect, reveal like maybe something like a Caesar Valius in your hand, make it unable to be killed by battle, and just let your opponent just ram into it without doing anything useful. So that's it for the Vanquish Soul monsters. For the Vanquish Soul spell traps, this is technically not a Vanquish Soul spell trap, but it is related to the archetype. And this, so even though this cannot be searched off of Mad Love, this card is still a mandatory 3-off, because this thing basically allows you to transition from one, given a single attribute, you can go into like another Vanquish Soul monsters off that attribute. So, which means you can reveal any monster, even something like an Ash Blossom, to summon your Raisin from the deck. So yeah, this is that mandatory 3-off. Now for the rest of the actual Vanquish Soul spell traps, I run 1 Continue. This is like a quick play monster reborn. 1 Dust Devil, which is basically like a Book of Eclipse, and it's searchable, a quick play searchable as well. And finally, 1 trap card in Snow Devil. This thing, if I have to compare it, I remember comparing this card to something like the Red Rain for the Red Dragon Archfiend deck. And it's pretty obvious like why this is the case. Because you can reveal up to 3 different attributes of Earth, Fire, and Dark. And if you reveal one attribute, you get a free special summon from your hand for any Vanquish Soul monster. If you reveal 2 attributes, then you can prevent all Vanquish Soul monsters you control for the rest of this turn from being destroyed by card effects. And the best part is that if you reveal 3 attributes, you basically destroy all monsters on the field, but its effects are cumulative. So basically, since you revealed, if you reveal 3 attributes, that means you, by extension, you also revealed at least 2 attributes. Meaning that even though it says destroy all monsters on the field, your own Vanquish Soul monsters are protected by the second part of the effect. And on top of that, it also adds a little bit of burn damage. So you could actually win in game with this as well in a tight spot. Next up, for the non-Vanquish Soul cards, 3 Kashtira Fin Rare, free special summon just like Pantera, and its on-field effect is insane. If it attacks or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can just target any card your opponent controls and banish it, but not only banish it, but banish it face down. And on top of that, it's a free search on summon as well. And what do you search for? You search for your Vanquish Soul, Kashtira Rise Heart, not Vanquish Soul, sorry. So why do I say search for this? Because it's fire. And when you open this, you summon this, search for this, activate your Stake Your Soul, reveal a fire attribute, and now you automatically can summon out either your Vanquish Soul Jiaolong or your Vanquish Soul Raisin, just off of a Fin Rare, and which is just off of a Fin Rare and a Stake Your Soul, which is really cool. Next up for the hand traps, I run 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Ghost Bell. Ghost Bell is kind of an interesting situation because right now I don't think it's good against a lot of decks. But note that it's an Earth attribute, and right now in this particular deck, we don't have a lot of other Earth attribute monsters. I believe Finver, Pantera, and the Caesar Valius are the only ones. So having an extra Earth attribute to reveal is definitely like a huge plus. 3 Dimension Shifter. And like I said at the start of this video, this deck does have some benefits against many other like meta or rogue decks of the strategy in this current format. And why I say like this is a good strategy is because a lot of decks, if they rely on their graveyard, because Vanquish Soul is inherently slower, by running Shifter, you can basically stop your opponent from playing, which will give you 1 extra turn to kind of catch up and set up your tempo before your opponent can go all out. This is also really good if you end up losing the die roll and going second. Because if a deck is really graveyard reliant, they will literally not be able to play around Shifter without something like a Call by the Grave. And after this video, I'll actually show you a really interesting combo you can do with Shifter, where you can actually drop Shifter not turn 1, but turn 2. So continue with the hand traps. Like if Shifter ever gets banned, I'll probably have to run more copies of DD Crow. And it's not as good as Shifter, but it serves a similar, albeit much weaker, in a similar purpose in a much weaker way. And finally, 3 Infinite Impermanence, because again, like it's just a 1-for-1 negation of something on the field, can be played during either player's turn. So yeah, that's it for the hand traps. And the final cards in the main deck, 1 Rhoda because Raisin is a warrior. Same reason with Durandal. Again, like just a free warrior search is never a bad thing for the deck. Pot of Prosperity because it's limited to 1. And 1 card that I found is actually really underrated in this deck, Small World. Like you don't know, like literally every single monster in this deck, and I mean every single monster in this deck, I can play Small World and find a way to get to Raisin. And I'll actually demonstrate this at the end of the video. And then finally, 1 Call by the Grave, because again, like block hand traps yourself. And final trap card you run is There Can Be Only One. This card is one of those floodgate cards that doesn't affect this particular deck because all the monsters are different types and attributes. But if you're playing against something like Tenpai Dragons, you just flip this, well, you can only have 1 dragon on the field. And they can't synchro if they only have 1 dragon, so they're basically stuck. So yes, unfortunately, it is limited to 1, and I wouldn't be surprised if this card and Rivalry of Warlords and Ghost Match all get banned eventually. But hey, if you end up drawing this or like somehow like digging into this with say your Pot of Prosperity, and you know your opponent is reliant on summoning monsters with the same type, all the same type, then just set this. And the thing is, even like going first, this card acts as a floodgate. Going second, this card acts as like a pseudo board breaker as well. So that's what makes it different from cards like, say, Summon Limit, which is only useful, say, going first. So that's it for the main deck. Now let's take a look at the extra deck. Start off, 3 copies of Rock of the Vanquisher. This thing is basically the go-to link monster for Vanquish Souls. And the thing is, even though it has 0 attack, attacking with this thing is hardly what you want to do with it, because first of all, its effect protects it from being targeted by battle, because it says if you control a Vanquish Soul monster, and note that Rock of the Vanquisher is not a Vanquish Soul monster in and of itself. If you control a Vanquish Soul monster, your opponent can only target monsters you control with the highest attack. And this is actually interesting, because let's say you control a Raisin, but you control a Fenrir. So you would think, like, given this situation, well, like, what would your opponent be forced to attack? Most people would think they Raisin, because that's a Vanquish Soul monster with the highest attack. But that's actually not how the effect works. Rock of the Vanquisher's effect specifically says your opponent can only attack the monster with the highest attack on the field if you control a Vanquish Soul monster. This means that since Fenrir has the highest attack on the field, on your side of the field, even though like it's not a Vanquish Soul monster, your opponent still must attack the Fenrir and cannot attack either the Rock or the Raisin. So as like a double layer of protection on the Rock. And its second ability allows you to, as a quick effect, you can do one of 2 things each turn. One is that you can take a Vanquish Soul monster from your graveyard and add it to your hand. And 2, you can summon a Vanquish Soul monster from your hand. So its effect is really similar to something like a Vanquish Soul Continue in that sense. Although the thing is, you can only do this during the main phase. So if your opponent tries to imperm this during the standby phase or the draw phase, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say you're still negated. But if you summon this and your opponent tries something like, oh, I'll just Ghost Mourner Moonlight Chill to negate this, you can immediately chain its effect on summon and still get its effect off regardless. Next up for the non-Vanquish Soul Link monsters, Unicorn. Basically non-targeting, non-destruction removal. It still targets. SP Little Knight, this one should be self-explanatory. Masquerena lets you link summon during either player's turn. And then these 2, there's a lot of ways for me to make this in a Vanquish Soul, but really I've never really made either of these. Like the vast majority of the time, these are just like a fodder for Pot of Prosperities. And then for the Xyz monsters, yes, this deck can use Xyz monsters as well. Typhon, Zeus, Flare Metal. If you actually manage to get a Fenrir and a Heavy Borger on the field, and then you burn your opponent with your Heavy Borger, and your opponent is at really low life points, you summon this thing, and you basically lock your opponent out of playing the game. It's like the equivalent of this deck's version of Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, in a way. Next up, Battling Boxer, King Dempsey. This card can search your Raisin if, let's say, you open Mad Love and Pantera, but no Raisin, and no Stake Your Soul, and no Rhoda, any way to get your Raisin. You can simply say Special Pantera, normal the Mad Love, get your Search or something, overlay for this, now you have your Raisin on the field. And the second effect actually has a pseudo protection effect, which is pretty cool. Abyss Dweller, obviously, lock your opponent out of using the graveyard. So really good against decks like Tyr. Time Thief Redoer, mostly just because if you can just keep stacking Xyz material under it, and then once you decide, okay, that's enough material, summon your Zeus on top. And the final card is Baguska. And this thing is really such that if your opponent just, let's say, they activate something like, oh, I'm going to activate like Motarmi Purulia or Motarmi Full Loss. Okay, you don't want to let your opponent draw that many cards. You just summon this thing in defense mode and hope that's enough to lock your opponent out of playing the game for at least 1 turn. And most of the time, if your opponent doesn't have something like a Dark Ruler No More or an Imperm or Droplet to negate it, they would most likely be completely locked out. Next up for the side deck, we have 3 copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. This hand trap is, in theory, is really powerful, but the thing is most decks this format will probably be able to come up with negate by either the 5th summon, or they will be able to continue extending after you Nibiru them. So the best way to use this is to pair this with another negation, or bait out their negation first and then Nibiru them. Next up for the board breakers, obviously like the Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, 3 Dark Ruler No Mores, 3 Triple Thrust to search for any one of these 3, any one of these 3, or any one of these 3 evenly matched. Yes. And don't forget that this thing going first, you can even use it to search for something like Vanquish Soul, Snow Devil, and it'll save you the effort of having to search it with something like a Mad Love. Imagine you summon Mad Love, it gets Veilered, or like your opponent negates it with something like a Ash Blossom. You can use Triple Thrust to set this from the deck directly anyways, and next turn you can still play this and get the effect off. So now I'm going to show you an interesting combo you can do if you open Vanquish Soul Raisin and you open something like a Dimension Shifter in your hand. So normally you would think that, for Dimension Shifter, you have to drop it on the first turn or it's useless later on. And I would say that's completely true. However, for this deck, what you can do is you summon Vanquish Soul Raisin, activate Raisin's effect, and you're going to search for your Vanquish Soul Heavy Borger to your hand. Next, you're going to link it to the graveyard and summon your Rock of the... You're going to summon out your, Rock of the Vanquisher to your side of the field. So at this point, your opponent's probably thinking, okay, he has a card in the graveyard. I'm now shifter proof. And at first glance, this is true. But now you're going to activate Rock's effect, summon out the Borger, activate the Borger, reveal a dark monster in your hand. It doesn't have to be a Vanquish Soul. It's just any monster as long as it's a matching attribute. Dark. And now you get to say maybe you draw a card from your deck. And now you say you pass turn. Now it's your opponent's turn. Activate Borger's effect, standby phase, reveal, shifter again, draw another card from your deck. So now you just drew 2 cards, and before your opponent even had a chance to do anything. So now it's your opponent's main phase, and yes, they get to make the first turn. But let's say they on the first move in the main phase, they do something, immediately chain this, get this thing back to your hand, and now after their thing resolves, now your shifter is automatically live, and you drop shifter, and this is your second turn, by the way, and like you already drew 2 cards, and you have your Raisin set up, you have Borger on the field, you have Rock on the field, and your opponent is still locked under shifter for at least another turn. So yeah, this is definitely something you could consider. So yeah, this is it for my Vanquish Soul deck. Hope you enjoyed the video. And let me know what you guys think. Are there any other tech choices I missed that I could have used to make this deck better? Leave your comments in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.